The thief's hand was taken, the human's creation became the bond between them. The plasma cutter sparked against reinforced titanium as Zara Veltereth's fingers danced across the vault's locking mechanism. Sweat beaded along her blue-tinted skin, despite the climate suit's cooling system. 3 minutes until the station's security sweep reached this sector. Her enhanced hearing caught the whisper of boots on metal flooring. Too early, too close. The double cross hit her consciousness a split second before the energy blade sliced through her left wrist. Cassius sends his regards. Rask's voice rumbled behind her, as her severed hand tumbled into the vault's depths. Pain exploded up her arm in white-hot waves. Zara's ears flattened against her skull as she spun, her remaining hand already reaching for the plasma cutter. But Rask was gone, emergency klaxons wailing through the station's corridors, and her life was bleeding out onto the cold deck plating. 3 weeks later, she sat in the sterile waiting room of Reeves Cybernetics, her left arm ending in medical wrapping just below the wrist. The prosthetics she'd been offered by other specialists were crude replacements. Basic mechanical hands with limited dexterity, no sensory feedback, nothing that could match the precision her profession demanded. Zara Veltereth? She looked up to find a human male studying her with dark eyes that held both scientific curiosity and something softer. Kai Reeves was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30 standard years, with calloused hands that spoke of practical engineering rather than just theoretical knowledge. "You're the one who thinks he can give me back what I lost," she said, rising with fluid grace despite her injury. "I'm the one who's going to give you something better." His confidence should have annoyed her. Instead, something in his tone made her pulse quicken as she followed him into his workshop. The space hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced fabrication equipment. Holographic displays showed rotating models of prosthetic designs unlike anything she'd seen. "Most prosthetics rely on basic neural impulses," Kai explained, his fingers moving across a haptic interface to bring up her medical scans. "Simple on-off switches that your brain learns to trigger. Crude, but functional. And yours?" He turned to face her fully, and she caught the slight catch in his breath as his gaze traveled over her features. Humans found her species attractive, she knew. The feline characteristics that made her people such effective hunters and thieves apparently appealed to their baser instincts. "No neural mesh integration," he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. "Instead of just receiving commands from your brain, it becomes part of your nervous system. Full sensory feedback, precise motor control, even enhanced capabilities beyond what your original hand could do." Zara's ears perked forward despite herself. "Enhanced how?" "Tactile sensitivity beyond normal ranges. Micro-vibration detection for safe cracking. Variable grip strength up to crushing force when needed." His eyes met hers. Everything a professional thief might require. Heat pooled in her lower belly at the way he said, "professional thief." No judgment, just acknowledgement of what she was and what she needed. Most humans either feared her kind or fetishized them. Kai seemed to see her as simply herself. "The integration process is intimate," he continued, moving closer to examine her injury site. "The neural mesh has to map not just your motor pathways, but your sensory networks, pain responses, even emotional triggers tied to touch." His fingers brushed the edge of her medical wrapping, and she suppressed a shiver at the contact. "How intimate?" "I'll need to monitor your neural patterns during calibration. Every sensation the prosthetic experiences, every signal it sends to your brain. I'll be reading all of it." His jaw tightened slightly. Some prosthetic users find the process uncomfortable. Zara studied his face, noting the slight flush along his cheekbones, the way his breathing had quickened. And others? Others find it overwhelming in different ways. The air between them crackled with unspoken possibilities. She could smell his arousal, faint but unmistakably present, mixing with the clean scents of his workshop. Her own body responded despite her attempts to maintain professional distance. "When do we start?" 2 hours later, she lay on his examination table while he made final adjustments to the prosthetic. The device itself was beautiful. Translucent biopolymer, shot through with fiber optic neural channels that pulsed with soft light. It looked more like jewelry than medical equipment. "The initial connection will feel strange," Kai warned, positioning the prosthetic against her wrist. "Neural mesh integration isn't like anything you've experienced before." "I've experienced plenty," she murmured, then caught her breath as the prosthetic's connection interface made contact with her exposed nerve endings. Warmth spread up her arm, followed by a tingling sensation that was almost pleasurable. The prosthetic's fingers twitched as Kai activated the neural mapping protocols, and she felt ghost sensations as if her lost hand were moving. Good, he said, his voice tight with concentration. The base neural pathways are connecting. Now for the sensory integration. He touched the prosthetic's palm with a stylus, and sensation exploded through Zara's nervous system. She arched on the table, a gasp escaping her lips as her brain struggled to process the input. Too much? Kai asked, his hand hovering over the controls. No, she breathed. It feels real, more than real. Every nerve ending in the artificial hand sent signals that her brain interpreted with startling clarity. But something else accompanied the sensations. A strange echo, as if someone else were experiencing them alongside her. Kai's eyes widened as he stared at his monitoring equipment. That's not possible. What? The neural mesh, it's creating a feedback loop. His voice carried a mixture of wonder and alarm. Somehow, your nervous system is interfacing with mine through the calibration link. As if to prove his point, he touched the prosthetic's fingertips again. And this time, Zara felt not just the sensation, but his reaction to it. The slight tremor in his own hand. The way his pulse quickened. The heat building in his core. Their eyes met across the examination table, and she saw her own shock reflected in his expression. Whatever he'd created, it had bound them together in ways neither had anticipated. Kai, she whispered, flexing her new fingers and feeling his sharp intake of breath as if it were her own. The prosthetic hand closed into a fist, and through their impossible connection, she felt his heart racing in perfect synchronization with hers. Kai's hands trembled as he disconnected the calibration interface, but the neural link remained. Even without the direct connection, he could sense Zara's presence like a warm current beneath his skin. This shouldn't be happening, he muttered, pulling up diagnostic readouts that made no sense. Neural mesh technology doesn't create empathic links between users and technicians. Zara sat up slowly, testing the range of motion in her new hand. Each movement sent ripples of sensation through both their nervous systems. Maybe your technology is more advanced than you thought. She flexed her fingers, and he felt the phantom movement in his own hand. When she traced a finger along the examination table's edge, the texture registered in his mind with startling clarity. Try to block it out, she suggested, noting his discomfort. I can't. He ran a hand through his dark hair, the gesture betraying his frustration. It's like trying to ignore my own heartbeat. The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Zara slid off the examination table, her movements fluid and predatory. Each step toward him sent waves of awareness through their shared connection. Then don't fight it, she said, stopping just close enough that he could smell her skin, warm and faintly exotic. Zara, this is a serious malfunction. We need to... She pressed her prosthetic hand against his chest, and the sensation struck them both like lightning. Through the neural link, she felt his sharp intake of breath, the way his muscles tensed beneath her touch, the sudden spike of arousal that made his pulse race. Does this feel like a malfunction? She asked, her voice dropping to a purr. His hands came up to cover hers, skin meeting biopolymer, and the double sensation nearly buckled his knees. He felt her touch through his own nerves while simultaneously experiencing how it felt to touch him through hers. Warm skin over lean muscle, the rapid thrum of his heartbeat. We need to run more tests, he said weakly, but made no move to step away. Her prosthetic fingers traced along his jawline, and the sensation was magnified through their link. Through her enhanced tactile sensors, she could feel the slight stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin, the way he leaned into her touch despite his protests. Sensory mapping, he managed. Range testing. We need to understand the parameters of the connection. A slow smile curved her lips. Professional curiosity. But through their link, she felt the truth. His scientific fascination warring with raw desire. His need to understand what he'd created battling against his need to explore what it meant for them personally. Show me what it can do, she said, stepping back just far enough to give him space to breathe. For the next hour, they worked through increasingly complex tests. Kai had her manipulate objects of different textures, while he monitored both their neural responses. The prosthetic's enhanced sensitivity meant she could feel the grain in wood, the molecular structure of different metals, even electrical fields generated by active circuits. But it was the emotional feedback that proved most overwhelming. Every sensation she experienced through the prosthetic carried an echo of his reaction. When she touched something pleasurable, she felt his vicarious enjoyment. When the sensors detected something dangerous, his protective instincts flared through their connection. Try this, he said, handing her a piece of silk fabric. The moment her prosthetic fingers made contact, they both gasped. The artificial nerve endings were sensitive enough to detect individual fibers, and the sensation translated as pure sensual pleasure. Through their link, the feeling amplified and reflected back until neither was sure whose reaction was whose. Kai, she breathed, the fabric slipping from nerveless fingers. He stood frozen, watching her face as waves of sensation continued to ripple between them. The workshop felt charged with electricity that had nothing to do with the equipment humming around them. She moved closer again, and this time he didn't retreat. Through their connection, she could feel his internal struggle. The engineer in him wanting to solve the puzzle of their link, while the man in him wanted to surrender to the intimacy it created. Zara, we barely know each other. I know you've been alone in this workshop for months, perfecting technology that most consider theoretical. She reached up with her prosthetic hand to touch his face, and they both shuddered at the contact. I know you took my case because you saw a challenge worth solving, not because you needed the money. Her fingers traced his cheekbone, and through their neural link she felt his wonder at her touch. Both the physical sensation and his amazement that someone like her would touch someone like him with such tenderness. I know you've never felt anything like this connection we share, she continued, stepping close enough that their bodies almost touched. And neither have I. The truth of it resonated through their link. For all her experience, she'd never experienced anything approaching this level of intimacy. Every emotion, every sensation was shared and amplified until the boundaries between self and other began to blur. The neural mesh wasn't designed for this, he whispered. Maybe it was designed for exactly this. She leaned in until her lips were almost touching his, close enough that they shared the same breath. Through their connection, she felt his desire spike, felt the moment his control finally snapped. His mouth captured hers with desperate hunger, and the sensation exploded through both their nervous systems. Every nerve ending fired at once as the prosthetic's neural pathways carried not just the physical sensation of kissing, but the emotional resonance. His relief at finally giving in, her satisfaction at breaking through his barriers. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, pulses racing in perfect synchronization. We're in trouble, he said against her lips. The best kind of trouble, she agreed. And through their link, felt his reluctant smile even before she saw it cross his face. Outside the workshop, security cameras tracked their every movement, transmitting footage to displays where Cassius Mordain watched with growing interest. The proximity alarm shrieked through the workshop at dawn, jolting Kai and Zara from sleep. They'd spent the night on the narrow cot in his office, their bodies intertwined, the neural link creating an intimacy that transcended physical touch. Even unconscious, they'd shared dreams, sensations bleeding between sleeping minds. Company, Zara murmured, her ears swiveling toward the main entrance as her enhanced hearing picked up multiple footsteps. Through their connection, Kai felt her instant transition from drowsy contentment to predatory alertness. Her muscles coiled with tension that transmitted directly to his nervous system, flooding him with adrenaline. How many? He whispered, pulling up security feeds on his tablet. 6, armed, professional. Her prosthetic hand flexed unconsciously, and he felt the micro-vibrations as its sensors analyzed the building's structural resonance. They're not here to negotiate. The workshop's main lights flickered and died as someone cut the power grid. Emergency lighting cast everything in crimson shadows that made Zara's blue-tinted skin appear almost violet. Cassius found us, she said, sliding from the cot with fluid grace. The neural link, Kai realized, his mind racing through the implications. If he has medical scans from when you lost your hand, he could track the prosthetic's unique signatures. Footsteps echoed through the workshop as their attackers spread out, moving with practiced efficiency. Through the neural link, Zara felt Kai's fear spike. Not for himself, but for her. The protective instinct was so strong it nearly overwhelmed her own combat reflexes. Stay behind me, she whispered, but he shook his head. We're connected now. We fight together or not at all. Before she could protest, the office door exploded inward. Rask filled the doorframe, his massive frame silhouetted against the emergency lighting. The enforcer's scarred face split into a cruel grin as he spotted Zara. Cassius wants his property back, Rask rumbled. Both the data you stole and that pretty new hand. Zara moved like liquid lightning, her prosthetic hand snapping out to catch Rask's wrist as he drew his plasma pistol. The enhanced grip strength Kai had built into the device crushed bone with a wet crack that echoed through both their nervous systems. Rask screamed and dropped the weapon, but 2 more enforcers appeared in the doorway. Energy bolts seared the air where Zara had been standing a heartbeat before. Her enhanced reflexes, amplified by Kai's analytical mind calculating trajectories through their link, keeping her ahead of their aim. The ventilation shaft, Kai said, pointing to a grate near the ceiling. Too narrow for both of us. Then we go down. Through their neural connection, she felt his plan forming. Desperate, dangerous, but possible. The workshop's lower level housed his experimental equipment, including prototypes that could level city blocks if triggered incorrectly. They moved together, their shared awareness allowing them to anticipate each other's actions with supernatural precision. When Zara ducked, Kai was already moving to cover her blind spot. When he stumbled, she was there to steady him before he consciously knew he was falling. Energy bolts chased them down the narrow stairwell, scorching metal and filling the air with acrid smoke. Zara's enhanced hearing tracked their pursuers' positions, while Kai's technical knowledge mapped the optimal route through his own workshop. There, he gasped, pointing to a reinforced door marked with radiation warnings. Zara's prosthetic hand interfaced directly with the electronic lock, her neural mesh allowing her to crack the security protocols with inhuman speed. The door slid open just as Rask and his team reached the bottom of the stairs. Inside the experimental lab, prototype devices hummed with barely contained energy. Kai's hands flew over control interfaces while Zara positioned herself between him and the door. Through their link, she felt his concentration narrow to laser focus as he activated systems that had never been tested outside simulated environments. "What are you doing?" she asked, even as she felt his intentions through their connection. "Creating a distraction." The first enforcer through the door walked into a gravity field that compressed him to the size of a marble. The second triggered a temporal displacement that aged him 30 years in 3 seconds. Rask himself pulled up short as he realized the room around him had become a maze of lethal science. "You're trapped," the enforcer called out. "Cassius knows about your little neural link. He knows you can't run far without each other." Through their connection, Zara felt Kai's sudden spike of realization and fear. The link that had brought them together had also made them vulnerable. They were bound now in ways that went beyond choice. "He's right," Kai whispered. "The neural mesh integration is too deep to reverse quickly. If we're separated by more than a few kilometers, the feedback could cause permanent damage. Then we don't get separated." Zara's prosthetic hand found a plasma torch among Kai's tools. The device hummed to life, its cutting beam bright enough to sear retinas. Through their shared senses, she felt Kai's wonder at how naturally she adapted to each new tool, how the neural mesh allowed her to interface with any technology he'd touched. "Together?" she asked, raising the torch toward the ceiling where heavy support beams held the building's upper floors. "Together," he confirmed, his hands joining hers on the torch's grip. The cutting beam sliced through metal like butter, sending showers of sparks cascading around them. Above, the building groaned as structural supports failed. Rask and his remaining men scrambled for the exit as tons of concrete and steel began to collapse. But Kai had calculated the collapse pattern perfectly. A pocket of space remained intact around an emergency shaft that led to the building's sub-basement tunnels. They dropped through the opening just as the experimental lab disappeared under falling debris. In the darkness of the maintenance tunnels, they pressed against each other, hearts hammering in perfect synchronization. Through their neural link, relief and exhilaration flowed back and forth until neither could tell whose emotions were whose. "That was either brilliant or completely insane," Zara breathed against his ear. "Both," he admitted, his arms tightening around her. "The neural link. It's not just connecting us, it's making us stronger. Your reflexes, my knowledge, combined in ways I never imagined possible." Above them, sirens wailed as emergency crews responded to the building collapse. But in the depths below the city, Kai and Zara moved through shadows like a single entity with 2 bodies, bound by technology that had become something far more profound than either had expected. They were no longer just engineer and thief. They were something new, something unprecedented, and Cassius Mordain would stop at nothing to either control or destroy them. The abandoned subway tunnel stretched ahead of them, its darkness broken only by the bioluminescent glow of Zara's prosthetic hand. 3 hours since the workshop's destruction, and Cassius's hunters were closing in. Through their neural link, Kai felt Zara's exhaustion matching his own, but also her grim determination to reach the old spaceport. "The ship will be heavily guarded," she said, pausing to listen for pursuit. Her enhanced hearing picked up the distant hum of search drones scanning the tunnels behind them. "Not the passenger terminals," Kai replied, his mind working through schematics he'd memorized years ago. "The freight docks have independent launch systems. If we can reach Dr. Vasquez's research vessel." They moved through the tunnels with fluid coordination, their shared awareness allowing them to navigate obstacles without conscious communication. When Zara's prosthetic detected unstable rubble ahead, Kai was already finding an alternate route. When his knowledge identified a maintenance shaft leading toward the spaceport, she was moving before he finished the thought. But as they climb toward street level, pain lands through their neural link. Sharp, artificial, wrong. Zara stumbled, clutching her prosthetic hand as foreign signals invaded their connection. Someone's hacking the neural mesh, Kai gasped, the invasive data streams sending feedback spikes through his nervous system. Above them, Cassius Mordain's voice echoed from hidden speakers throughout the tunnel system. Such an elegant solution, really. Why chase you when I can simply override your precious neural link? The prosthetic's fingers spasmed as external commands overwrote Zara's motor control. Through their connection, Kai felt her panic as her own hand turned against her, prosthetic fingers closing around her throat with crushing force. The link works both ways, Cassius continued, his tone conversational despite the violence he was orchestrating. Hurt her, and you feel it too. But override her prosthetic, and you're both helpless. Kai's hands flew to Zara's throat, trying to pry the prosthetic fingers away, but the artificial limb's strength was beyond human capability. Through their neural link, he felt her struggle for breath, felt her consciousness beginning to fade as oxygen was cut off. Stop fighting, he whispered against her ear, even as every instinct screamed at him to save her. Trust me. Instead of pulling at the prosthetic hand, he pressed his palms against it, skin to biopolymer. The neural mesh that connected them flared to life as he forced his consciousness deeper into the link than ever before. If Cassius wanted to control the prosthetic, he'd have to go through both their minds. The invasion felt like ice water in his veins as hostile code tried to overwrite their connection. But Kai had designed the neural mesh architecture. He knew its deepest protocols, its hidden pathways, the backdoors he'd built for emergencies. Through their link, he felt Zara's desperate love and trust, her absolute faith that he would find a solution. That emotion became a weapon as he turned it against the invasive programming, using their connection's emotional resonance to burn out the foreign code like an immune system attacking a virus. The prosthetic hand released her throat, and they both collapsed gasping to the tunnel floor. But the victory was temporary. Through the speakers, Cassius's laughter echoed with genuine appreciation. Impressive, the crime lord admitted, but you've only delayed the inevitable. They emerged from the tunnels into the industrial sprawl surrounding the spaceport. Massive cargo haulers sat dormant in loading bays while automated systems processed shipments bound for distant worlds. In the distance, Dr. Vasquez's research vessel gleamed under floodlights. But between them and freedom stood 24 armed enforcers, their positions carefully chosen to create overlapping fields of fire. Rask himself waited near the ship's boarding ramp, his broken wrist encased in a medical brace, but his plasma rifle steady. Surrender now, he called across the empty loading bay, and Cassius might let you live long enough to explain how you created that neural link. Through their connection, Kai felt Zara's predatory smile before he saw it cross her lips. The attack on their neural mesh had backfired in ways Cassius hadn't anticipated. Instead of weakening their bond, the shared trauma had deepened it, creating new pathways between their minds. You want to see what our connection can do? Zara asked, her prosthetic hand beginning to glow with stored energy. Kai's technical knowledge flowed through their link as he accessed the prosthetic's hidden capabilities, systems he'd built but never tested, emergency protocols designed for situations exactly like this. The biopolymer fingers reconfigured themselves into shapes that had never existed in nature, energy conduits forming patterns that turned her hand into a weapon of impossible sophistication. They moved as one entity across the loading bay, their shared consciousness allowing them to anticipate and counter every attack. Energy bolts that should have found their mark passed through empty air as they flowed around danger with inhuman grace. When Zara struck, it was with Kai's knowledge of pressure points and structural weaknesses. When he analyzed tactical situations, it was with her predatory instincts guiding his thoughts. Rask's rifle discharged once, before Zara's reconfigured prosthetic tore through the weapon's power core, turning it into scrap metal. The enforcer himself crumpled as neural feedback from the prosthetic's contact overloaded his nervous system. Within minutes, the loading bay was silent except for the groans of defeated enforcers. Dr. Vasquez appeared at the research vessel's airlock, her eyes wide with shock at the carnage. Elena, Kai called out, relief flooding through his voice. We need passage off-world. What have you done to yourselves? The doctor asked, her medical scanner detecting the neural mesh signatures radiating from both their bodies. We evolved, Zara said simply, her prosthetic hand returning to its normal configuration as they boarded the ship. But even as the vessel lifted off, carrying them away from Cassius's immediate reach, Kai knew their battle was far from over. Through their connection, he felt Zara's thoughts align with his own. Whatever came next, they would face it together. bound by technology that had become love, and love that had become something transcendent. 3 days out from the spaceport, Dr. Vasquez's research vessel drifted in the void between star systems, its hull gleaming against the cosmic backdrop. In the ship's medical bay, Kai and Zara lay intertwined on the examination table, while Elena ran her final scans of their neural mesh integration. "The connection has stabilized beyond anything I thought possible," Elena said, her voice filled with scientific wonder. "Your neural pathways have essentially merged into a single hybrid consciousness while maintaining individual personalities." Through their link, Kai felt Zara's amusement at the doctor's clinical description of what had become the most intimate bond either could imagine. Every thought, every sensation, every emotion flowed between them like shared blood through shared veins. "Can it be reversed?" Zara asked, though through their connection Kai felt her hope that the answer would be no. "Theoretically, yes," Elena replied, adjusting her scanner settings, "but the process would require surgically severing neural pathways that have grown far beyond the original prosthetic interface. The trauma might leave you both permanently damaged." Kai's hand found Zara's, flesh-meeting biopolymer, and the touch sent cascades of warmth through both their nervous systems. The question of separation had haunted them during their escape, but now, feeling the depth of their connection, the idea seemed not just unthinkable but pointless. "We don't want it reversed," he said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. Elena nodded as if she'd expected that answer. "Then you need to understand what you've become. The neural mesh isn't just connecting your minds. It's creating something new, a form of consciousness that's greater than the sum of its parts." She turned her scanner display toward them, showing the intricate web of neural connections that now linked their brains. The patterns were beautiful, resembling abstract art more than medical imaging. "Other species across the galaxy have attempted similar neural bonding," Elena continued. "Most failed catastrophically, but a few succeeded in creating partnerships that transcended individual limitations. You're the first human-alien pairing to achieve stable integration." Through their link, Zara felt Kai's pulse quicken as the implications registered. They weren't just lovers bound by technology, they were pioneers, the first of something unprecedented in galactic history. "Cassius will never stop hunting us," Zara said, her practical nature asserting itself despite the wonder of their situation. "He'll see our connection as a weapon to be captured or destroyed. Then we make sure he can't find us," Kai replied, his mind already working through possibilities. Dr. Vasquez cleared her throat delicately. "Actually, I may have a solution to that problem. My research has been focused on establishing contact with the Synthesis Collective, a group of species that have achieved various forms of neural bonding. They've been searching for proof that such connections could bridge the gap between organic and artificial consciousness." She gestured toward Zara's prosthetic hand, which had begun to glow softly in response to their heightened emotions. "Your neural mesh represents exactly that proof. The collective would offer you sanctuary, protection, and the chance to help other species achieve what you've accomplished." Through their connection, Kai and Zara shared a moment of perfect understanding. The choice before them wasn't just about their own future, it was about whether they were willing to become symbols of a new form of existence. "Where do we find this collective?" Zara asked. "The Helix Nebula," Elena replied. 3 days jump from here, but once you make contact, there's no going back. You'll be leaving human space behind forever." Kai felt Zara's hand tighten in his, prosthetic fingers warm against his skin. Through their link, he sensed her thoughts aligning with his own. They had found something together that transcended species, transcended the boundaries between organic and artificial life. The idea of sharing that discovery, of helping others achieve the same connection, felt like destiny. "Set course for the Helix Nebula," he said. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. They spent hours in the ship's observation deck, watching stars wheel past while exploring the deepest layers of their neural connection. Each conversation revealed new facets of their merged consciousness, new ways their individual strengths complemented each other. When they finally emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Helix Nebula, the sight that greeted them took their breath away. Dozens of ships from across the galaxy hung in formation around a massive space station that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Each vessel represented a different species, a different approach to consciousness and connection. "Welcome, pioneers," came a transmission in multiple languages, the voice somehow conveying warmth despite its alien origin. "We have been waiting for you." As their shuttle approached the station's docking bay, Kai and Zara stood at the viewport, their hands clasped together, flesh and biopolymer united in perfect harmony. Through their neural link, they shared the same thought. the same wonder at what they had become and what they might yet become. The station's docking bay opened before them like a flower blooming in space, revealing beings unlike anything they had ever seen. Some were clearly organic, others appeared to be living machines, and still others seemed to exist as pure energy contained in crystalline matrices. But all of them radiated the same sense of connection, of consciousness expanded beyond individual boundaries. "Are you ready?" Zara whispered, her prosthetic hand squeezing his with gentle pressure. Through their neural link, Kai felt her excitement, her anticipation, her love for him, and for the journey they were about to begin. In response, he shared his own emotions, his wonder at what they had discovered together, his commitment to exploring this new form of existence, and above all, his certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. "We're ready," he said, and together they stepped forward into a future where the boundaries between self and other, between organic and artificial, between love and technology, had become meaningless. Behind them, in the depths of human space, Cassius Mordain raged at reports of their escape, but his fury could not reach them here, in this place where consciousness itself had evolved beyond the limitations of flesh and circuitry. Zara's prosthetic hand glowed with soft bioluminescence as they walked toward their new life. The neural mesh that had begun as medical necessity now serving as the foundation for a love that transcended species and a connection that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be truly alive. In the end, her stolen hand had not been taken. It had been transformed into the key that unlocked possibilities neither of them had dared to imagine.